everyone. It's me, Tal Aviezer, your imaginary friend from when you were a child, now come to life when you most needed me.
Terrifying.
I am here.
I'm so frightened right now. Oh my gosh.
I am here with entire cast and question mark and company question mark of Podcast Party Descent Into Avernus. I'm joined by the Dungeon Master stylings of Matt Gordon. Matt, this is where you say hello.
Hello. I am stylings.
And the Cannistra as pain bearer Corbin Shiv.
Hello.
Carolyn Fox as Hylan.
Hey.
Ofelia. Let me take other way around. Rachel Tamarin is the real person who plays Ofelia Leodon.
Are we sure about that?
And
I'm 50-50 on that.
am the Tal Aviezer who plays Renaissance. Today, December 29th, 2021, is the 1 year anniversary of the release of the very first episode of Podcast Party Descent Into Avernus.
Amazing.
So I am raising an imaginary glass of champagne to all of you.
You guys didn't get the memo? I have a real one, but whatever.
Congratulations.
Oh, no.
Okay.
But well done, everybody. There are lots of actual play podcasts, and ours is one of them. But
it is.
many of them do not make certainly not a full year of programming and releasing a new episode every 2 weeks, or a year, and we're actually over a year because we've hit our anniversary, so we're at a year and 2 weeks.
Yep.
Pretty amazing.
Great job, team.
We have a bunch of questions.
Cool.
Some of these questions, the call is coming from inside the house, as it were.
Another terrifying thing.
Yeah, we have some questions for each other. And we also did get a little bit of a last minute rush on listener submitted questions. So we do have some of those.
Love that.
Cool. I've gone through all of the questions. So I'm not segregating the listener questions from our questions that we're asking each other. I've sort of grouped them by topic. So we'll work through them. There were a few that I did preemptively censor because the answer to them was pretty much going to be, that's a spoiler.
Right.
Right.
I did cut a few of those, and there may be a few that I was on the fence about whether they'd be a spoiler or not. So I will count on Matt to just plead the fifth in a few cases.
Okay.
Right.
I'm good
because
at that.
we are many months ahead of what is actually being posted.
That's correct. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we know what's a spoiler. Yeah.
Correct. So we're going to go ahead, and the first group of questions sort of has to do with I'm going to call this the pre-campaign. First question is for the Dungeon Master Matt Gordon.
Oh, goody.
Matt, did you link any of the characters' backstories that weren't linked before the game started? And I think this person means in terms of linking the backstories to each other, like linking Renaissance's backstory to Hylan to, or Ophelia's to Corbin and so forth.
I didn't explicitly do that because I didn't know if that was going to be something that would actually have a payoff to some point. And I wanted things to flow organically as much as possible. So unless someone specifically stated in terms of their backstory that they wanted to have a specific link with another character, then I did not, I didn't link them, after we started.
Right. Now, having said that, though, the adventure as written does sort of include a way of roping everybody in together, which is that
correct. Yeah.
Everyone is responsible for committing a crime.
Yes.
I can't remember if it's explicitly a murder or if there were other crimes that
there were
other crimes that you guys could have. That's right.
Yeah.
You guys picked murder. Imagine
Right.
It was the most fun option.
It was the most fun.
To be fair.
Yeah. So the deal with Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus is part of the setup of the adventure is the players and the Dungeon Master work together to basically choose/create a crime that all the players are implicated in. So that is immediately a link. Right.
It's not. I wouldn't necessarily call that like a backstory individually. I'd say that
sure, but
immediately.
But it's something
that happened before the first scene of the adventure.
Very true. Yeah.
And it was not just choose a crime. It was also what are your roles in the crime.
Right.
And so that was established pretty early on. And that did also, it did force us to actually come up with like, how did this person know this person a little bit? Because of, okay, we need someone to help dispose of the body. Who's our connect for that? Okay, it's Hylan, but who knew Hylan?
Yep.
Like that, all these little things.
Yeah,
someone needed to do the murder. I don't know who that might have been, but
we picked Ofelia as the trigger man.
I don't know why you guys picked poor Ofelia to take the brunt of this particular crime.
I know why.
Honestly, because she could pull it off.
Yeah, that's really what it was.
Could have pulled it off. I don't know.
Oh, she could. She was the most capable of like killing someone without using any weapons.
Just like in real life.
To make it well, it didn't go exactly to plan as it turned out. But the idea was it would be the easiest for me to get in there, do a creepy bard spell, leave no trace, and then get on out of there.
And that he wouldn't.
Ideally, it would have looked like an accident, but
right,
yes.
right, and that he wouldn't until it was too late to suspect sweet Ofelia of coming to murder him.
I love that though. I love that it's literally the sweetest, most sort of, I guess, of the four of you, most wholesome, so to speak. That is the one who really just does the most horrific thing right off the bat.
Yeah. There's a follow-up question that's sort of for the group along the same lines. Did anyone prepare backstories that are linked? And Carrie, I think you and I did sort of sketch out that Renaissance and Hylan knew each other and had a relationship.
Right.
That
yes.
sort of went back a little further than the others.
Yes. We didn't really speak too much about it, but we did decide that would be the case, that we knew each other before this.
I think during the episodes, you kind of see how the relationship dynamic is played out. I think that Renaissance is a little bit in awe of Hylan because she has this very special connection to the divine that he doesn't feel like he has. And at the same time, I think she finds Renaissance a very sort of reassuring and calming and grounding person. She sort of turns to him for support.
And he makes her laugh, and she needs that sometimes.
Aw. We all need a good laugh sometimes.
Yeah. You do a good job with that too. It's nice. It's a nice relationship.
Another question for Matt. This is a more general question, I think, about DMing, Matt.
Okay.
When you DM for a group of people with different levels of assertiveness, how do you as a dungeon master balance the game for all the players to make sure that everyone has a voice?
It's a great question overall, and it's a real challenge in some situations to make sure that everybody does have a voice, because some people will choose to be silent, and that's totally fine. Some people would rather be more of a listener and be sort of more of an observer. So it really is dependent on what is needed. I will always give the opportunity to players to have a voice within any session or any campaign if they desire it. Some people are uncomfortable speaking in even in small groups, which is totally fine. But I think everybody has to have some input as a character. Else, why are you there? I mean, you could just be part of an audience. So I think that the way that you can craft that within either a group of experienced players who may have a less experienced player who doesn't necessarily feel comfortable because they just don't really feel up to the task, or even a group that has, a little bit of an imbalance with some person talking and one person talking a little less, is just altering the focus a little bit as the DM. You can, for example, think of a way to refocus the scene on that particular player and ask them not necessarily what they would say, but how they feel. How they feel in a specific context. They may not necessarily want to voice it. They might not necessarily want to be verbal with it, but just to actually start to have that particular player think about how that particular character feels. And I think that that's the key to sort of discovering how that voice is crafted from there on out.
I would also just add that I think there's a little bit of a difference here between performance game like Podcast Party is and a regular casual game of Dungeons and Dragons with your friends. Because I think when if you're just playing with your friends, and some people are just quieter people, or maybe they just enjoy the game, in a quieter way. They really like listening. I have run for a lot of players, and some players tell me like, I know I'm quiet, but I love to watch the other people role play.
Right.
Like I just love being there for it. And I'm not that good at it, but I like, I just like being more of a listener during those moments.
Right.
And like, if you're just playing with your friends and that's how somebody wants to play, like that's perfectly fine.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think the important thing is to periodically invite them in and give them opportunities, but never make them. Like,
Right.
I'm going to force you to role play more. Like don't put them on the spot. Just give them the opportunity to come in if they want to. Maybe sometimes an NPC asks them what they think, or they're just moments that they can pick up if they want, without being like, this is a 15-minute scene about you. Go.
Right. It's not even role play sometimes. It's how do you describe what this looks like? When you, as a player, are able to describe what your particular character looks like, either in their appearance or in the way that they perform combat, or what their gear looks like, or what their spells look like, because everybody's individual and everybody has the opportunity to showcase that individuality in role playing. So whether or not you're speaking to your fellow players or to NPCs, you could simply describe to the other players what things look like to you, and that will also invite that additional level of interaction.
Yeah. And with an actual play or performance game or whatever you want to call it, I think it is a little bit of a different animal, and whether you want to call that sort of part of the casting of players or maybe session zero conversation, I think there sort of is a general understanding that you're meant to bring a personality to this.
Yeah.
It's an audio medium, so.
Yeah.
But I think, we're, a lot of us have performance backgrounds. Usually the problem is getting us to shut up.
That happens in the editing. You just edit people out.
Yeah, Carrie is great at getting us to shut up. Thank you, Tal. What I was going to say was, it's interesting for me, not naturally being the sort of person who is shy and reserved. Usually, I also never shut up, but I'm playing a character in our podcast who is much quieter and more reserved, and that was a sort of a tricky thing for me. And it's been a challenge to know, okay, when do I hang back as Ofelia, because this is what Ofelia would do, while making sure I'm not getting like lost in the shuffle. So like Rachel, as the player, have to kind of find moments where I want her to interject or get her more involved. But I don't want to go against my character. It's an interesting sort of a dynamic, and you'll see another side of my role playing personality if you listen to our special holiday episode. My character that I created for that game, Indica Irregula, is kind of pretty much the exact opposite sort of personality from Ofelia. So,
question for the players: in the character creation process, how do you create a fully fleshed out character from just a backstory hook? Or in other words, how do you all think about how you would role play the general character traits that a character would have? Sarcastic, glum, arrogant, out of just their motivation for adventuring. Like, I think this person is asking, like, I'd say it is a tough one. I think this person is asking, like, when you're making a D&D character, you write down some maybe one-line character traits about their personality, like maybe 3 or 4 of those. How does that become a person?
I think for me, they become a person by interacting with the other people. So I definitely have a sort of gut feeling, and I figure out certain basic things like, how much does this person care about other people's feelings? Will they put expediency ahead of someone's feelings? Things like that, so that in certain situations you would know what they might be considering. And then just sort of basic parameters. And then once you get into the group with the other people, those people sort of start showing you who you are as well. So I would say I don't figure it out too much to the tiniest detail. I just figure out enough where I have a person to be for other people, and then we can start that process.
Andy, how about you? Because Corbin is like such a unique, character. How would you answer this one?
For me, it's the story of the character. Like what brought this character to this point, who they were. And with Corbin, he didn't really want to be a cleric. He's not good at it. He's unsure, the typical things you would think of a priest or a cleric. So he's unsure of it. So that's why he's kind of a slow talker, and he cares for people, but then he was a different person before. So I kind of grabbed the different elements of his story. And then once we start playing, I'm like, okay, this is this guy who he is. How would he act? How would he respond? And I just try to stay with those basic premises that I created him with, and that story that I created him with, and just see where it takes him. Because I don't know where his story is going to go. Just like we don't know our own stories in our real lives. I don't know what's going to happen with him.
I would say with Renaissance, he turned out to be quite different, I think, from the character that existed on paper. I think I envisioned a maybe a little emotionally younger, less jaded, or idealistic, but maybe more naive and open, sort of more of a fresh-faced character. And as soon as I started playing him, and I actually got to play him in a one-shot just because I wanted to sort of test the character out. And I think in the one-shot, I think he might have been 3rd level or 5th level, because I wanted to play with the mechanics a little bit, because I'd never played a paladin before, like just so I wouldn't be fucking up so much on the air. And immediately as I started playing him, the voice that he has, I just started doing it, and he was like way more cynical and jaded and kind of manipulative as a person than I was necessarily intending him to be. So that may be a little bit of a writery thing. I think sometimes when you start writing characters, it's like they tell you who they are and what they want to do. So I think that the answer for me is Renaissance was not a fully fleshed out character during the character creation process. He became a person when we started playing. How about you, Rachel?
Yeah. Well, for me, actually, Ofelia was a character I was very comfy with going into this game because I had played her before. When I played Curse of Strahd just casually with a group of friends, that's when I created the character of Ofelia. And I had actually initially thought to use a different character for this setting, but as I learned more about Avernus, and I thought, okay, what sort of a character would be interesting in this setting? I think for the same reasons that she was interesting in Curse of Strahd, she is equally interesting in Descent into Avernus. And I think having this sort of haunted background in this, like this bit of a fear of her own power was really kind of what drove my character motivation both times, really. And that came from Wizards of the Coast does an excellent job in the player's handbook of really using that background and like finding something from the features or traits or, the flaws or whatever, what motivates you, finding something that really stands out to you, and then kind of using that to inform, to try to flesh out your character's backstory a little bit. I find they're really helpful prompts to just get your imagination going. And certainly for Ofelia, having the haunted background was a big part of that, and understanding really who she was.
Okay, there's actually a few background questions for me. I'm just going to group these together. Where do you think Renaissance would have ended up if he hadn't become a paladin? What made Renaissance decide to become a paladin? Is he happy with his decision? I think that Renaissance is a seeker, and certainly was very much a seeker when he was younger. And I think he looked up to and idolized and relied upon his older brother to explain the world and its mysteries to him. And when his older brother was removed from the picture, he was very much adrift. And I think that was probably a crucial moment for Renaissance, where he could have gone as a character in a lot of different directions, depending on what powerful personality or group discovered him and chose to either help him or exploit him. Like, I think if Renaissance had met the wrong person at that point in his life, it's quite possible he might have ended up as something like a warlock instead of a paladin, because he would have glommed onto whoever impressed him as someone who knew what was going on and what they were doing and could sort of provide guidance and leadership. Like, I think he would have been a good Scientology recruit, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's very, I don't know if Renaissance understands how lucky he was.
Yeah, fair.
That he fell under the auspices of a relatively benevolent, you know, sort of Church of Ilmater and other good gods, like charitable orphanage organization that set him on the path to being a paladin. I think that was a very important experience for him, and being exposed to all of those teachings and that way of thinking maybe saved him more than he thinks, although he has problems with it as an institution, and he's not somebody who functions well within very rigid institutions. But I think it's of all the places he could have ended up, he's lucky that is what ended up happening to him. I think things could have gone very differently. I'll put it that way. Is he happy with his decision? I think he's, in a way, I think he may be happier now than he's ever been.
When we're in hell?
Yeah, because he feels like he has a purpose and a clear idea of what he's doing.
Making notes. Okay.
And I think it's creeping at him out to a little bit also that I think spoilers. So I won't say anything more about that.
I already said hell. That was a spoiler.
Yeah, well, I think they know that much.
From the title of the piece, they might have an inkling.
I didn't know what that meant.
Or Rachel. Do you, Rachel the human, not Ofelia the character?
Are we sure?
Yeah, Rachel the human. Do you think that the killing of Dr. Hulk Finster was justified?
Oh,
Dun, dun,
gosh,
dun.
absolutely. I am all for mercy and empathy and compassion and second chances, but there are some people
He was a
who are
murgidly
just
erdler.
monsters. Yeah, that is an accurate description, Tal. I don't have any sympathy for somebody who does not view their fellow human, or I don't want to say human, right? Because D&D, their fellow person, as less than, as disposable, as, you know, if you're not treating somebody with even just the basic, you know, respect that you would treat a fellow, that you would consider to be a fellow with, I have no time for you. And I, quite frankly, I don't know if I have quite the amount of chutzpah that Ofelia does, and certainly I do not have the same level of magical abilities, though I'm working on it. But I think in her shoes, Rachel the person would have absolutely done the same thing, especially if he had killed the person I loved most in the whole world.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if he had like a Frankenstein there with Tal's face on it, I'm definitely.
Oh my God, there's no way I would not do. I mean, as it is, yeah, anything physically within my power now, be it you know, far less impressive than Dissonant Whispers, like I'd be clawing and biting and grabbing whatever scalpel I could find on the table. Yeah, I absolutely think his murder is justified. Do not feel bad about it at all.
As a counterpoint, if that person was trying to make the person that you loved most in the world better,
doesn't matter.
Define better.
Not if they're going out and just collecting people and killing them.
Well, those people needed to be better too.
Oh well.
Follow up. Ofelia, the fictional character, does she feel the same way? She feels it was justified.
Absolutely. I think perhaps the circumstances of how she found herself committing the murder were not ones that she feels great about now, because she feels a bit manipulated. But that said, I don't think she really would have done anything differently, and I think if anyone would have offered her, the opportunity to find Azor, to avenge Azor, she would have taken it.
I got the combat stats open, and there's been a lot of blood under the bridge since Dr. Hulk Finster.
Oh yes.
We are looking at 38, 46.
Oh my gosh.
55. We have killed 55 people.
There were a number of them that we gave a chance to get away, and they did not take it.
A few of them did not perhaps qualify as personhood. They wore gloves or things like that.
There's a devil here or there.
Yeah, we've killed 55 creatures since Dr. Hulkfinster. For Rachel, this possible spoilers, so we'll see how much we want to get into this.
Okay.
There have been hints dropped about Ofelia having encountered dark spell books and songs in her past.
Yes.
Were these important events in her life? If so, can you tell us about them, or will they be revealed in the podcast?
I think they will likely be revealed in the podcast, so I don't want to get into them too much. But what I will say is, as I had mentioned previously, she has the haunted background. And so what I will say is the nature of her initial run-in with the supernatural and her initial haunting experience was absolutely tied to dark magic, dark musical magic. And that's all I'll say about that.
Got it.
All right.
For now.
Cool.
Question for Andy.
Oh,
Is Andy, a human, able to tell us more about how Corbin ended up in the Church of Ilmater? This person says, I think I remember him mentioning that he faced some pretty harsh conditions there, meaning in the church. How did he and his sister end up there? So possible spoilers, but I don't know if there's anything you want to say about this.
no one's really asked him about that. So I think I don't want to spoil it because I think Matt will at some point bring it in. But I will say he wasn't a willing participant in the church. And I would doubt his sister was because she's not the nicest person in the whole world.
What are you talking about? She's great.
She's awesome.
She's fantastic. I don't know what you're talking about, Andy.
And then because of who he is, you know, not really wanting to be in the church, I don't think he was treated very well by, as he said, by most of the people there. And he had all the shit jobs for like 10 years and just did everything. Right. But I don't want to get too spoilery, so.
Sort of similar question for Carrie. Just, we don't know a lot about Hylan's past. Can you throw us a bone?
That's great.
Okay.
I love these questions. They're
She
great.
has a cat. I don't know what the fuck you people want. You saw the cat.
What else do you want? I have a cat.
That's all.
Cats
you need.
are evil.
Originally, she was taken from her family and brought to Baldur's Gate. And this is where she developed some of her anxiety issues because she was brought somewhere unfamiliar to her under bad circumstances and had to sort of find a life for herself. And the PTSD from that sort of manifested as her anxiety issues. But I sort of decided not to lean on too much of that in her story because I don't want her to be just an unrelentingly victimized, struggling character. Everybody is sometimes victimized and everybody does struggle, but I didn't want it to totally overshadow her. She has always had Melitium with her, and that has sort of been a through line for her. As her life changes, Melitium is always there. The reason she became a rogue is that she wanted to help, and she feels compelled to help people that are struggling or oppressed. And that is sort of a directive from Melitium. That's a common thing for people with celestial blood to feel. And she saw that there were some ways to do that that seemed pretty great, where you could also be a great person and do nice things and distribute things for the church. But she also started to see that there was a whole underbelly and people invisibly being persecuted and murdered and victimized in places that those kinds of helpers don't go. And she felt sort of more pulled to get into those places and help people there. So she decided to figure out the skills that she needed in order to sort of go undercover in that situation. And then she found out she was really good at it. So her ultimate, her reason for doing it was to be of help, but she decided to sort of take on all of the messiness and uncomfortable emotional feelings that go with sometimes doing things that are wrong so that you can be in those wrong places for the right people.
Finally, a question for me. Can you tell us more about Thomas and how he got the way he is? This is a question about Thomas Wheelwright, who is Renaissance's brother. And I guess I would just say about that, there is a scene that has been recorded but has not yet aired that goes some ways towards answering that question, I think. Maybe not completely, but will tell listener more than they know to this point. So I will leave that until after that episode is aired, where we get a little bit more about why Thomas is the way he is. Okay, moving on to the next section. I'm going to call this section of questions out of game. Question for Matt. Without spoiling anything, can you tell us a little bit about your process for prepping a session of this campaign?
It's no different from prepping a session of any other campaign, in my mind, at least how I attack this kind of stuff. And that is, first of all, understand how much time you have, and then understand the big picture of what you want to get done that session. Sometimes it may not happen completely. You may go completely off the rails, and that's totally fine. But if things do go the way that your structure allows, you should understand how much time those things potentially may take. Example, combat may take, based on the combats that you've had with your players, a certain amount of time that is different than combats that you've had with other players. That's something that you have to sort of understand. Combats, of course, take more time in later levels than they do earlier levels, so you have to sort of balance your description and understanding about that kind of thing. So time is the first sort of factor about prepping a session. Always understand how much time that you have and how much time that you need to prepare the kind of things for that session.
Just full disclosure for the listener, the last session that we recorded ended with us, pretty much me and Andy, causing a fight to start. And Matt saying, I don't have another hour to run this fight right now.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, it could end in a very, very small amount of time.
Right.
It doesn't have to take an hour for me to kill you all.
That one's not going to. I have a feeling.
But suffice it to say,
Don't say that, Andy. Don't jinx it like that.
You have to understand time, and then you have to understand the elements of your game, what kind of story points and what kind of character interactions that you want to have in that particular session. I try to do this. I try not to prep more than one session ahead. Some people do 3, 4, 5 sessions ahead, which is like, what are you doing? You're pinning yourself into a hole. As a dungeon master and as a storyteller in general, because if you have a story that you don't really know what way things are going to turn, but you have a sort of overarching skeleton structure of the story, you don't know how long it's going to take to get to the next big beat that needs to happen. Yeah. So you pin yourself into a hole when you do that.
I find that planning too many sessions ahead also begins to make assumptions about player agency to a degree. You know, it's sort of like, well, they better do this because I've prepped the next 10 hours. So if they decide at the end of the next session to go in a completely different direction, then you've maybe done a lot of unnecessary work for yourself.
That's true. Yeah. But I mean, overall, what I do is sort of a note form. I talk about like major characters, the kinds of motivations for those particular characters that they may perhaps meet that are in relative close proximity to them. They're not like going to go teleporting across hell or wherever to find a specific character. The potential encounters that they may have, combat and otherwise, as well as just the overall understanding of where they are physically in an area, so that you know that if they go north, east, south, or west, you can understand with relative ease what that place looks like and how to describe it.
Got it.
From there on out, it's just a matter of just being facile with how well you can do gameplay.
Parry and Rachel, a few months ago, we did an episode of this show, Power Word Talk, with myself and Matt and Andy, where we talked about Dungeons and Dragons as performance. So the three of us already kind of got to answer this question, but I was curious to hear briefly from each of you about this one. How does playing Dungeons and Dragons as a performance change the game? How is it different from playing a regular game?
Well, for me, honestly, it doesn't change that much. I guess I'm more aware I would say I choose my words a little bit more carefully. I think for me, yeah, everything's a little bit more deliberate. There's, I try to do less like speaking as myself versus speaking as the character. Unless it's a point of clarification in terms of like, like I'm moving to this square or whatever, in Roll20. Whereas outside of the performance aspect of the game, I might do a lot more strategizing with my party or, taking time to really formulate, a plan in battle or, some sort of complex thing that we're executing. Whereas with this, it's sort of more in the moment. I'm just doing what my character is doing. But otherwise, I think I'm pretty much the same. I'll still, I did the voice that Ofelia has now. And when I played her in Curse of Strahd, and, I think, yeah, it's really the biggest difference I would say is just, I'm more aware that I have an audience. Well, which, I don't have an audience when I'm playing, not for performance, of course.
Carrie, how about you?
I would agree with a lot of what you said, Rachel. Two things I would add to it are, one, I feel like in a situation where I know others are listening and engage, we're trying to engage them in the story somehow, I think a little bit more about how my actions might help to sort of illuminate other characters as well, for the sake of the story. So sometimes I will ask a question on purpose to sort of draw them out a little bit or show something about their personality. So in some ways I focus a little bit more outside of myself than I would normally just hang around playing a game. And the other thing is, it's trivial, but I am aware of my voice more. So I have a pretty low, slightly monotonous sounding, like Janine Garofalo. I love her, but I sort of have her kind of voice, and I'm more aware of like trying to modulate it and vary it when I'm speaking on the podcast than I am just where I'll just run on and sort of mumble like this. So I would say I'm more aware of just trying to make the character's voice sound interesting.
Just sort of more animated.
More animated than I normally would just speak naturally.
I had another thought that occurred to me as you were talking about, this is incredibly superficial, but I guess when I'm playing a game with other people that's not for performance, I am much more preoccupied with, do I like my character? Whereas in this setting, it's do other people find my character appealing? Will the audience like my character?
They like me. Yeah.
They really like me.
Yeah.
Or even if they don't, that's fine. But but I want to make sure she's somebody that an audience can relate to. Whereas when I'm playing, I choose a character for myself first, and I just do whatever I think is fun.
I think,
I don't really want the audience to hate Ofelia. So,
I actually think that all four characters are likable. And I think it's because they sort of strive to do the right thing despite being flawed people.
Yeah.
And they persevere. I think you tend to generate sympathy when you try, when you keep trying and you care. Harry, after a year of editing this show, do you have any advice or another group or another editor about doing a podcast like this from an editing standpoint?
Yes. I think you should be very interested initially in editing. It should be something that you find creatively interesting to you, because it's going to take a lot of time. And especially at first, I would say now, once Tal started helping, that cut some time down, and also just my improved ability with editing has cut down on some time. But at the beginning, we are talking a snail's pace. So you just have to be ready at the beginning to know that you'll be spending a lot of time learning the software and going down a lot of rabbit holes on the internet. But I would say that is counterbalanced with your interest in it. So it's also very stimulating and creatively satisfying. So do a lot of research. Also, just listen to other podcasts that you like. So you can listen to people's speech patterns, what kind of music they use, how they do their intros, just to get a sense of what you think works and sounds professional so that you can kind of pick the way you want your podcast to sound. I will just give a big shout out to Monument Studios right now because they made a big difference in our podcast. They have royalty-free music packs and sound effects packs that you do have to pay for, but in my view, they're one of the more affordable ones, and it's a huge library, and that will save you a lot of work just trying to hunt around the internet to finding like music that you're not stealing from anybody because you don't want to do that. So Monument Studios, freesound.org is good. Basically, you just have to be interested in doing it because it's a lot of work. So if you think it's something you're not really that into, maybe try to find somebody who is and don't do that to yourself. But I have found it really rewarding and great. I've learned a lot and it's very satisfying.
If you're a fan of Podcast Party Sent Into Avernus, and there are a lot of actual play Dungeons and Dragons podcasts. Why do I stick with this one? Like, why does this one more engaging or sound better? It's impossible to overemphasize how much of that is the editing. It just makes so much of a difference in the listenability of the show. I mean, I'd say
absolutely agree. Absolutely
I'd say
agree.
that the three biggest factors are the fact that everybody on the show has a performance background. So there's a certain understanding of that gives it an edge. The editing, and also the fact that we understand that we're doing this particular show as an audio show, and it's tailored to that. It's not just an audio recording of a Dungeons and Dragons game.
Right.
And Carrie's editing work is just so vital to the past year of the show.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to keep things moving. We're going to move on to another section. This is just a general section looking back at the past 26 episodes. So some of these questions are really specific and some of them are a little broader. Question for Andy. Listener asks, I was wondering how Andy thought of having the pillow as a spiritual weapon since that's so unconventional.
I wanted Corbin to have an unconventional weapon, and there's a time when he goes to the place where he sleeps at night, his little cell, we'll call it, and he barely has a pillow. In that moment, I was like, oh, that'd be kind of funny if that was a spiritual weapon. So it was sort of a funny thing, and also I wanted something different. And true story, when I was a little kid.
Oh, great. I can't wait.
Here we go. It all comes down to.
Here we go. Here we go.
To this.
I have a feeling that it was about to be very sad, but let's
Oh my God.
It's a little sad, but maybe it led to Corbin's whole character. No, I actually had a babysitter who said he could hit me with a pillow, and he could hit me with a pillow so hard I would cry. Now, I was busting his chops before that and was probably provoking him a lot. And I laughed at him and I thought that was stupid. He hit me with the pillow and I was a little kid and I cried. He was never my babysitter again. I'm not sure why. Thinking about anyway.
Never challenge a babysitter. Never.
Yeah.
If you take away one thing from this Power Word Talk, be nice to your babysitter.
I was wondering if he used it because it was something that had been denied to him. He always describes it as like a really sort of high-end pillow. Like it seems to be like a luxury item in a way that's velvet, like very un-Corbin.
Yes, and Corbin has had no luxury items in his life. So for him, whatever
didn't even know what the massage chair was.
Right. And for him, if he got a pillow that was soft and fluffy and had flowers on it, it would be like the greatest thing ever. He would think he made it in life if he had that. So it was all these things kind of combined, and I was like the pillow, and I'm like, oh, I hope this goes over well and doesn't come out stupid. But I think it's really fun, personally.
Matt, was the ambush on the road to Candlekeep part of the original adventure? I'm thinking this was the Deadcock and Deadcock and Friends.
Right.
Obviously, the Corbin sister part was added. What other parts did you add? I'm not sure if the person is asking what did you add to the ambush or what other parts in general have you added that aren't in the book?
There have been things that I think that have laid into your characters that we've added either as encounters or as direct connections with NPCs that you guys have spoken about that I thought were instrumental to character development. And I think you guys agree that that actually helped bring you guys closer together as well as flesh out your characters. But in terms of specifically this particular part of the adventure in the Road to Candlekeep, there is a portion of the original adventure where you can, as a DM, you can just sort of fast forward through all that stuff. But I think it's actually a journey to a specific place is fraught with danger and can be a great inflection point for how characters react. And I think it's an opportunity for something to occur. In this case, the actual adventure does have a specific ambush, but I didn't particularly think it was really allied to the way you guys were. It sort of came out of the blue, and certain characters that you haven't really dealt with that much are involved. So I decided that the characters that I thought might be somehow involved, considering the speed with which you left Baldur's Gate, might be involved with this sort of surprise. It's Deghawk. And I leading up to that, I did sort of offhand ask Andy about this particular relationship, and he sort of said, well, yeah, that she's this and she's that. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Nothing sort of completely, you know, playing my hand or showing my hand, I should say.
You freaked me out, man, when you did that.
My job has been done.
Wow.
For Tal, what do you think Gargoth would do if it was released from the shield? I think we have some. I think I can't remember who, but somebody did like a really good lore check on Gargoth, and we were given like a lot of information about his backstory, and he was
that was
like
actually
it was Silvira Savicus.
That's exactly right. It was Silvira Savicus.
So we know that he was a servant of Asmodeus, and he's a pit fiend, and he kind of became a demigod because he had a lot of people in Faerun worshiping him. Like he kind of set himself up as a living deity. So I think that, like Rachel, Gargoth wants affirmation. You know, he wants to be liked by the people. So I think that if Gargoth would start running that playbook again if he ever gets out of the shield. I think that he would like to have followers and worshipers. So he would start, you know, orchestrating events to kind of rebuild his flock of followers and people to adore him and tell him that they like his character. For Carrie, considering what was drawn on the tree, do you think Hylan believes that fate is inevitable? I guess the person's asking like what was on the drawing. Do you think Hylan believes that's 100% now going to happen?
Yes. I think she does think that. I think her feelings about it change by the day based on how that day went. The drawing did not show me being defeated. It showed me in the midst of a struggle, of a fight. So there are times when Hylan thinks that she is going to die in that fight, and there are times when she's maybe hopeful that that outcome has not been determined yet. It's not necessarily fate that she's going to lose, but it doesn't look fun. So I'm going to say, yes, she thinks that's going to happen. She just doesn't know what the outcome will be. Not looking forward to it.
For Andy, why doesn't Corbin let the party know about Cassandra and the deal? Question mark.
I think Corbin is incredibly embarrassed. Isn't quite the right word. He's afraid they'll judge him. He's afraid they'll kick him out of the group.
They could perceive him as a threat, right? Based on what the terms of that deal are.
I just foresee like him like having visions of Sister Averly Hollow with a bell going, shame.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think it's also he's a bit cowardly about it. He doesn't want to tell them. He doesn't. He's ashamed by this, and shame is a good word. That's a better word.
Yeah.
Harry, what about Hylan as a character do you like the most?
The thing I find the most interesting about her is the dichotomy between her sort of human self and her celestial self. I find that an interesting sort of quandary to be in. In some ways, it's an incredible asset and has helped her in her life. But I think that, as you can see, she doesn't spend most of her time in some sort of spiritual state communing with her angelic guide. She is living a life. And I think that part of her at some points in her life has been very frustrated by the fact that she has a celestial guide and sort of a way of seeing things that has not made her bypass the sort of human struggles that she's going to have, either physically or emotionally. That it is helpful, but she is still a human being. And so I find that interesting. Like, what does that actually give her? And so I like her as a person, but as far as what I find the most interesting, it's that interplay.
Andy, what were your honest feelings and thoughts about the Devil's Deal as a player?
When it was first happening, my first reaction was like, no way, I'm not going to do this. But that was me, the player, saying, no. I'm not going to. There's no going back from something like this. I'm not doing it.
As a player, I really didn't want to lose Corbin at that point in the story.
No,
I will say that.
I didn't either.
But then I thought about Corbin's character and how Corbin has, for a bugbear, he's pretty old, and how he's survived as long as he has. And I said, Corbin would make this deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to go into too many details, but it was the right decision for Corbin. And part of it was he did care about you guys. Like, you're the first group of people probably in a long time, maybe his whole life, that he was at that time starting to feel had his back. He wasn't completely sure about Hylan, but the rest of you, sorry, Carrie, but the rest of you, the other two of you, he was like, I like these two. So he did want to save you as well, but I don't think that was his full motivation.
So for you, it was, if you didn't think Corbin, the character, would do it, you, Andy, as a player, were not going to do it.
Correct.
Okay.
And I was enjoying playing Corbin at the time. So there was that moment where I'm like, oh, but I really like my character, as a player. But if I felt like this was completely wrong for how I had set him up, and I would not have made the deal, or Corbin would not have made the deal.
Mm-hmm.
This is a question for Matt and Rachel. This is one of mine. I definitely remember writing this paragraph of a question. It's been nagging me now for a week since these episodes aired.
Oh my God.
Weirdly specific question. This reminds me of the Star Trek convention episode of Saturday Night Live, where the guy's like, what was the combination to the lock in season 3?
I remember that. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that.
So in episode 24, when about to attack Deghawk and knock her unconscious, Rhea mutters something under her breath. Ofelia is next to her. Matt has Rachel roll a perception check to see if she hears what Rhea muttered. Ofelia fails. So Matt just says that Rhea says something under her breath, but Ofelia can't make it out. In the following episode, episode 25, Ofelia asks Rhea what she said during the fight. And Rhea says, I said, I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. And Ofelia says, I understand. I don't think you have. What the fuck were they talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Because Rachel / Ofelia seem to understand what Rhea was talking about, but Tal has no idea.
Oh, wow. Okay. Rachel, you tell me what you think you understood.
Sure. I believe, if I am remembering correctly, that my thinking at the time was, during the fight with the Van Thampers and with Thavius Krieg, really, I think actually more so than the Van Thampers, she just sort of froze in this way. And I think she realized then that she had kind of made a mistake in doing that, and was jeopardizing her relationship with the only people that were on her side in the moment. And I think I think that's what I was responding to.
Okay.
Or Ofelia was responding to.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
Was that what you were going for, though? Because now I'm concerned it's not.
Well, I guess you could interpret it that way. Rhea, if you remember, is, she's just a 17-year-old kid who's never really had a whole lot of combat experience. She's been trained as a Hell Rider. She's escaped El Terrell and has come to Baldur's Gate and is basically just doing her best to survive. And in her first or second attempt at trying to make sense of all of this, she was dragged into a situation at the Van Thamper Manor. And essentially, in your first or second scene with her in combat, she killed an innocent man. She killed the butler downstairs, and you guys didn't even watch what happened.
Yep.
And she did it out of instinct. She did it out of just pure, I can't have my idea of what needs to happen with these Van Thampers go awry. And her idea of what is right and what is wrong has been severely tested the whole time that you guys have been with her. And then in that fight with Deghawk, it is literally her understanding that this is one of her compatriots' blood relatives, their sister. And she has the opportunity to turn that sword around and slash through the throat of that particular person, just as she did with that innocent man. And instead, she turns it around and she bashes Deghawk over the head. And in that moment, she can't let herself fail again.
Totally understood. So it was actually the decision to be merciful.
In a way,
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what? And I feel like this is going to sound like me being like after the fact, like, oh yeah, and that's actually what I meant. But like, I do remember now that was part of it as well. I had forgotten about the butler, and I feel a little bad about that now.
Okay.
But at the time, I did not forget how shaken she was at that experience.
It makes so much more sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Matt, what did Amric Van Thamper hope would be the outcome of sending us to Darmanzaj to take out the Cult of the Dead 3?
Oh my God. I have wanted to know that so badly.
Well, Amric's just ahead now, so I mean, you still have.
I'm going to assume that this book, the page is closed on this particular chapter, and it's okay to dig into it.
I will neither confirm nor deny any chapters closed of any story. But if you want to know, first of all, you have to understand the contextual setup of Amric knowing about what had happened. Remember that Amric was the guy who basically was set up before the story as the person who helped you guys after the murder of Dr. Thinster. Right. He was the guy who helped you to get rid of Thinster's body. Right. This guy is a crime boss, essentially.
No, we got all that.
Yeah.
But we sort of knowing, like, Amric could have had us do anything.
Sure. And
he sent us to Darmanzaj to take out the Cult of the Dead 3.
Correct. A couple of reasons. One, he sees that you're efficient as a team. So as a plus, Darman, he knows through his particular network of spies, is looking through the city for the Cult of the Dead 3. And that's a giant pain in his ass, as well as his brothers, because they, as well as their mother, are using the Dead 3 to fund their efforts against Baldur's Gate. That's the first problem. You guys, as a team, might actually be a solution to that problem, because let's say Darman sends you to find out the cult and you end up offing one of his potential rivals, who is his brother Mortlock, who he does not see very highly. Mortlock, of course, has been simped into thinking that he's part and parcel of this plan when, truthfully, they're all kind of playing each other off. Well, I guess that's part of the Van Thamper way, whatever it is. So if Amric can get you guys down into the hideout, get you through all of the various cult members and get you to Mortlock and maybe kill him off, well, then there's one less Van Thamper in the tree. And if things don't go that particular way and you guys end up, killing yourself, then, hey, loose ends are tied up with regards to any ties to Amric.
Matt, who has been your favorite NPC so far?
Oh man, it's like choosing my favorite child. Let's see.
I mean, I know who mine is.
I know who mine is.
Well, you know what? I'll turn that around to you guys. I'll turn that around to you. You guys go first, and then I'll tell you who my favorite is.
Who's your favorite, Rachel?
Slobber chops.
All right.
Slobber chops. Yeah. Slobber chops is
so
up there.
good.
Really up there.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
There's also, I have a second favorite, but I can't say it because it's a spoiler.
Okay.
Mine is Ultist the Cultist.
Okay. I'm down for that.
Oh.
I'm going to go with 3. Sort of, I like Thomas. I like what you do with Thomas a lot.
Great.
I liked Mortlock.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I did too.
And-
He's actually one of my favorites.
Oh,
I like Mortlock
the wine
too.
salesman, the guy who sold Andy.
That guy.
Was that good wine or not? I still don't know.
He
We'll
ripped you
never
off.
know.
I'm gonna beat him when I go back there.
I liked a couple. I liked I won't go into it because it's a bit spoilery, but the creature with the top hat.
Okay.
I enjoyed him or it.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed the halfling that was in the Elf Song Tavern.
Yeah, the halfling.
Oh, wrong halfling. I hated that halfling.
Oh yeah, that was
I thought the halfling that we confused at the Church of Ilmater. I like that one.
Oh,
Also good.
Brother Hodges.
Brother Hodges, yeah.
I love Brother Hodges.
Oh,
He
yeah,
got the
Brother
wine.
Great.
He did.
I also enjoyed.
no, I liked Lala though. I thought she was fun.
Buckethead.
Buckethead was awesome.
Buckethead was great. I'm going to get you right now. I liked his old timey. Yeah,
yeah.
he had a great old timey Hollywood quality that I liked.
So Matt, who was your favorite?
Well, my favorite is someone who the audience hasn't met yet, but I think that they're going to love.
Have we?
You have.
Okay.
I think you as the audience may know who this NPC is when they first meet this NPC. They may not necessarily have the most to do when you first meet this NPC, but their story is quite quite pivotal, quite pivotal, I should say.
Got it. Yeah, I think I know who you mean. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I also
I
love
think
that one. If that's who we're thinking
yeah.
of. Yeah. I
Yep.
bet we're
Yeah,
all
this is
thinking
the
of
one I didn't
It's
want
a
to
great character, yeah.
Spoiler,
But for the play, honestly, for the NPCs that the audience and that you have met so far, I'm going to go ahead and say Rhea Mantelmorn.
Mm-hmm.
Something about her just really like hits me in the heart. It's just like her purity and her emotional what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerability.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that she grows as a character throughout when we see her early on when she's just trying to survive, and then she just sees as what is not necessarily her destiny, but whether it's part and parcel of the Creed Resolute, which you guys have just found out about, or whether it's just a part of her nature to do the right thing is just a part of her. And there's a lot within her that is very sad and that is just heartbreaking, but she just powers through it. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, what do you find the most difficult and most fun part about playing a bard?
The most difficult thing is just constantly having to come up with vicious mockery insults. It's really hard.
It's a bitch. Yeah.
You got to write that shit
Yeah.
down.
Google them.
Yes.
And the thing is, even if you do, though, everyone's got the same sheet now.
I know.
I know.
It is tough.
It is what it is. But
And you've got the
that
cutting words
said,
too, which is almost the same thing.
it's basically the same. It's hard sometimes on the fly, especially when it's like, I don't know these people, you know, how am I going to do something that's like a real true, like a really good insult, you know? Sometimes it just doesn't happen, but that's why I've kind of fallen back on occasion on, you know, Shakespeare quotes or other references when I can. And actually I have not yet tried it, but our fabulous friend Sebastian has created a vicious mockery insult generator, which I am going to utilize
they did.
for episodes. Yes. So
Perfect.
Shout
to
out. They've
look at
linked
that.
it somewhere. It's somewhere in our Discord. Maybe when this episode comes out, I can kind of plug it again and reshare it so that you guys can use it in your own games if you, like me, struggle as a bard to constantly think of witty remarks. And I think the most fun thing is just there's a lot of freedom with that character. It makes me feel less afraid to try any given skill, whether or not I'm amazing at it, because I usually have some sort of basis in it. Like bards aren't really bad at anything.
Yep.
They usually have, at least some sort of base of, if you do something, you're not, maybe you're going to fuck up horribly, but there's certainly a chance you won't. So that
You contribute to any
definitely
situation.
Exactly. So it leads to me taking more risks, whether consciously or unconsciously, to just not be afraid to try something different.
That
and
kind
fun.
of ties into the follow-up question that this person has, which is, does Ofelia have a death wish?
Oh my God.
Does Ofelia have a death wish?
Wow.
That's
in fairness,
pretty on the
think they're
nose there.
referring-
Wow.
I think they were referring to your famous combat style.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys are talking
It's
about.
a fair question.
They haven't
Bard
even there are episodes
Let's
you guys
go.
have not heard yet. Get ready. But here's what I'll say. I don't think that Ofelia necessarily has a death wish, but I think so much has been taken from her that she is not necessarily afraid to die, because I don't think that she would consider that to be the worst thing that could happen to her. She has lost the person that she loves most in the world, and I think that's made her a bit nihilistic and a bit like, well, if I can go join him, I could do that.
Great answer.
So thank you.
So, wow.
Okay, this is a wrap up. Final 3 questions.
Uh-oh.
Here's a light and frothy. I like them to answer this fucking question on The View. Joy, what's your own personal idea of hell?
Jesus Christ.
Oh my God.
Someone has asked, what is your own personal idea of hell?
Okay,
I love
I'll
it.
admit it. I'm the werewolf. I put that question in.
I love it.
You're all welcome.
That.
I mean, it is a great question, but fuck's sake.
Well, it gives me ideas.
So I'm not going to answer.
I mean,
Damn it.
I do have an answer, which I think I am going to give because I can't offhand think of a way Matt can really use it against me in the game. I think that the classical definition of hell has one very well observed aspect about it in terms of, a thing to just basically as a social construct to terrorize people, which is that it is eternity. And I find the idea of an eternity of anything terrifying, which I think in the end, the fact that life is finite, it's natural to be afraid of death, but ultimately it's a very good thing, because the idea of being stuck in any situation permanently for eternity is a long fucking time.
Yeah, if we've
The
learned
idea-
anything from vampire movies, it's that you don't
Yeah.
want to live forever.
Yeah, I don't think, the human consciousness is not designed for that. It just the spending an infinite amount of time conscious permanently anywhere. I think that's a pretty good definition of hell. It's nothing's going to change. It's not going to change. It's not going to end.
Well,
It's
it's also
just-
going to be terrible, presumably.
Yes, but
An
the thing is,
eternity of something terrible.
an eternity of almost anything is terrible because it's an eternity.
Does that mean an eternity of repetitive joy is terrible?
It would get boring.
It would.
So
well, yeah. Does
boredom
it? At
is
what
hell?
point does joy cease to fulfill you anymore? Does it cease to be exciting? If you just have everything you
digging
want
deep
all
here,
the
folks.
time.
I'm digging deep.
Well, then we're also coming up against our feelings only worth something if they are in opposition to another feeling. Is the dichotomy important, or is just being happy okay, or is it that it is a contrast to being unhappy and that's what makes you feel?
I think for
happy.
the human consciousness, change is important.
Mhm.
And that's why eternity is unsustainable.
My idea of hell would be feeling completely disconnected, like isolated. So,
like a Johnny got his gun kind of situation. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
There's nothing to hold on to. Basically, if you remove all connection to people, feelings, places, and you are just existing in it, disconnected, that would be hell.
Wow. I'm going to say both of those are pretty bad. I'm going to say being helplessness. That things are happening, especially when you have like kids and people you care about and that sort of stuff, and things happen and you just have no control over it. I think that's hell. And especially if it was something that was an eternity, that would be unbearable. I hope we have a happy question at the end.
This is really interesting.
This is why I didn't end with this one. How about you, Matt?
Oh, man. I think unending loss. It's in the same way it's tying into yours as well, Tal, because like it's forever, right? Yeah, unending loss. It's the feeling that you have something physical, psychological, tangible, emotional, whatever it is. In a way, it's sort of an amalgam of yours, Tal, and yours, Carrie, because you are disconnected from something that you had and that you found pleasurable and that you found part of yourself, and that it is now gone.
Yeah.
And that you can never get it back. Whether that is a connection to people, whether that is a feeling, whether that is an emotion, whether that is a person, whether that is something that defines who you are, that it is gone. And that you know that it will never, ever be the way it was. That's hell for me. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse.
I think you guys summed it up really well. I don't have anything to add.
It's kind of funny.
Rachel's like, I'll rubber stamp that hell. Sure.
Yeah. Solid hell description. I guys have drawn out all of my own inner psychological demons without me having to say it. So good job. Thank you.
All right.
Good stuff.
My 10th grade social studies teacher, American history teacher, Mr. Putman, said something which I didn't necessarily appreciate at the time, but he basically said, if you think things are really going great and nothing can possibly go wrong and it'll never get worse, it will. But if you think things are really terrible and the situation is hopeless and irredeemable and it'll never improve, it will improve.
Yeah.
I think that's quite true. I mean, I think
we're getting into the teachings of the Buddha now.
Yeah.
Everything is impermanent.
Yeah, everything is impermanent.
Yes.
Thank God, though,
Yes. Yes. Who is it that says if you're going through hell, keep going? Does anyone know?
Oh, isn't that
bumper sticker, I think, says it?
No. No, it's a famous
Forrest
person.
Gump? No, it was the crab guy from Forrest Gump.
Winston Churchill.
I knew it. I was going to say it, but then I was like, if I'm wrong, I sound like such an idiot.
Okay, we'll follow up because I think a lot of shit people stick Winston Churchill on the end of it, and I don't know.
William Shakespeare said that.
Good old Bill.
Copernicus. So is the answer.
Now that we have some experience with the show and with these characters, is there anything maybe from an early episode or something like that in retrospect you would have done differently?
I would have hired myself to do this for money.
Same.
Just paid myself. That's all.
Yeah.
No.
I can think of a really, really detail that I'm sure I'm the only one who's conscious of, which is that originally, for whatever reason, in Renaissance's backstory, I had him operating as part of a small group of paladins in the lower city that kind of had a little shrine to Helm and Torm and Ilmater. And they kind of operated out of the Church of Ilmater, and they were sort of like a Robin Hood type organization to an extent. And they were called the Hand Resolute. And I think in episode 1 or 2, Renaissance actually introduces himself by saying Renaissance Hand Resolute as like the group that he's in. And it really never got used. I just sort of dropped it as an idea for him. And then later, like much later, like in the most recent episodes that the listeners will have heard, the idea of the Creed Resolute has been introduced.
Yep.
And it's just like a total coincidence that they have very similar names. And I, like, in retrospect, I wish I hadn't referenced Hand Resolute or used it earlier, just because it's like, is that confusing for the listener that there's this other thing called the Creed Resolute that also is sort of an order. So like in retrospect, I just wish I had this like idea that never really developed anyway. I wish I hadn't mentioned it the one time that I did.
I wish I hadn't pronounced Renaissance's name wrong in the first episode. I'm still sorry about that. It's that, it's that Elvish accent. It's really hard not to, say things like Ted Mosby does in How I Met Your Mother, which is what I realized in retrospect I had done. So I changed that. And I think probably just in general, I talked about it much, much earlier in this episode of Power Word Talk, but finding that balance of being able to be decisive as a player, but then as a character, knowing how to kind of balance that with being more shy and reserved. I think it's probably something that I'm harder on myself on than anybody else, but I think I wish I could have gotten that balance right from the start. But of course, it takes practice.
Anybody else? Anything?
Yeah, I got one. Oh, you want to go?
No, go ahead.
So for me, when I first started with Corbin, I had his voice down, but then my own regular playing voice, I kind of reverted back to when I just play D&D and I do goofy voices. And sometimes when I'm just saying, okay, so Corbin will do this, I say it with a stupid accent, and then sometimes just say it in my voice. And I just wish I was consistent with just using my voice. And when I listen to those old episodes, it irks me so much.
Andy, try having like 17 NPCs
That hasn't stood out to me, I have to say. That hasn't.
So just to clarify, like, you mean you speak as Andy, but using Corbin's voice?
No, I speak as Andy, but I talk like this or something. You say something like that?
I've never heard you.
Oh yeah, go back and listen to the fight with what was the pirate? Deadeye?
Yeah.
Oh, this is going to be fun. Yeah.
There's a couple times where I'm like, ooh, I hear it. Maybe no one else hears it and I shouldn't have said anything. Damn it.
I know that I sometimes fail
our
to
own
drop.
worst critics.
I fail to drop the Renaissance voice when I'm actually just speaking as me, but I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Works.
That's okay.
I always mix up accents, and I'm really bad at trying to maintain them sometimes.
Well, I think I don't know how anyone could do a better job with that.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. Mortlock Van Thamper. So sometimes I just like to listen to his voice. Like he sounds. I don't know who that is.
Like I think Rachel said we're our own worst critics, but like I always feel like I have like maybe in my head like how this person should sound, and I try it and I practice it, and then like I do it on the podcast, it never comes out the way I want it to.
Yeah, I think your dialect work is great in general on the show. I think it is always challenging as a DM sometimes when it's a long time between NPC appearances.
Yeah,
and you're like,
I write it down.
You can actually go back and listen to earlier episodes.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
This fucks me up in a regular D&D campaign because of course you can't. And I don't remember how I made the person sound like 10 sessions ago when you met them. Here's what I do in normal non-listenable sessions, and this is a hint to any DM that sort of makes say NPCs on the fly that maybe for some reason your characters may bump into, and then you just have to generate NPCs and characters on the fly. Write down their name, obviously, if you just make it up, because God knows how many times I've made up NPC names just out of my head and then completely forgotten them. So please write down these NPC names, even if they sound silly, and then write next to them who they kind of sound like. So even if you do like a half-assed job of trying to replicate the voice, you're doing a pretty decent imitation of what that person was when you first used their voice.
Right.
So like, I don't know, Jason Statham or Hagrid or, whatever, whoever, as long as that person is in your mind, you'll generate that voice again, similar to it.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie, was there something that you wanted to throw in that you wish you could have done differently?
No, I can't think of anything specific that's really I've been carrying around with myself. I would just say sometimes there are some stronger choices I wish I made, but there's still always time for that. And it's okay to make mistakes, so I'm fine with it. I wouldn't change anything, I don't think.
Harry, you could have changed Hylan's name to Hyland, so that way when Matt and I said Hyland instead of Hylan, we wouldn't be fucking up and you making us
all
look
the
bad.
time.
Well,
all the time.
originally my character's full name was going to be Hylan Dore, which is D''ORE.
Hyland Door.
And then,
That's what we're doing.
There can be only one.
Exactly. And then Tal said, if you say that really fast, it's just Highlander.
Which is kind of awesome.
I mean,
so I changed it. But that would have been even worse because her last name started with a D, so it would be even harder not to put a D on it. But there is no D, just Highlander.
so you made the right call.
I guess so, yeah.
Good
point of view.
decision.
Final question of the show. From the first year of the show, which includes everything up to and including Elvira Savickas opening the Infernal puzzle box, what was your favorite moment or encounter?
Oh, boy.
So much.
I'll tell you what has been my favorite fight, hands down, was the showdown with Lammer Van Thamper and Odious the Barb Devil.
Yeah, that was great.
That was really cool.
That was,
It was
great.
really good. Despite the amount of times Ofelia died. Very good.
17, I think.
I was fine. I was fine.
There's a lot of.
I
There
mean,
was a lot of.
did
It was
she
very high
die
stakes.
though? Because
Yes, it
I'm
was
pretty
very high
sure
stakes.
somebody else did actually die.
It felt like
And it wasn't
a
me.
really good climax to that arc,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of Van Thamper arc of the adventure. And it was a really high stakes fight, and it legitimately seemed like we were going to die at some point.
It was a great fight. It was so much fun. All right, so as much as I hated and loved the scene where Corbin died and met Cassandra, that was a fantastic scene.
It was.
But I think the scene that terrified me, and it wasn't even very long, is when Corbin went back to his little cell and Sister Averly Hollow came down and
Awful.
questioned him.
Yeah, she was creepy.
Andy was terrified. Corbin was terrified.
We're all.
That was so intense for me as a player. It was, Matt, you did a great job. In fact, the three women in Corbin's life that terrify him, you do a great job with all of them. But that one scene for me was fantastic.
Thank you, Andy. It's a pleasure to give you terrifying situations. I'll go last. How about that?
Uh-oh.
Way to help yourself out, not the rest of us. Classic DM move.
You're welcome.
I'll go next. It's actually it's not so much a single moment as this super cool kind of non-combat and I know some people are really here for the combat, but I loved when we each got that, and Matt, this was great that you allowed us to do this extended opportunity to sort of do like a solo expository moment with Matt, where we each got to have the opportunity to delve deeper into our characters' backstories. And I really loved learning more about your characters' backstories and, you know,
Agreed.
the vision that Hylan had and Renaissance's relationship with his brother and all that stuff. And yeah, it was just really, really cool. Of course, I liked my moment too with Azor. It was very sweet, and Matt did a really nice job. You really made Ofelia fall in love with him for real.
Kill him. She just put a really powerful, very painful spell on him. It didn't kill him.
Loaded his brain.
Yeah, did Russian roulette with his brain.
Yeah.
It's whatever. Listen, these things happen.
25% chance he would have done.
But yeah, I really I really loved getting to do that. And getting to learn more about everybody, and hopefully the audience liked it too.
Yeah.
Carrie, Matt is demanding that you go before him.
Okay.
I demand.
Because it's all about Matt.
Okay.
I mean, when has it not been? Come on.
I think I would agree my favorite fight was in the Van Thamper Villa. I really liked the little thing with the tree in the park, because I love how it started out as sort of like, who is this weirdo and what is this? And then how sort of serious and interesting it got and the effect it had on my character. And from a editing standpoint, one of my favorite things was Ophelia's nightmare about being finding
That was
Dr.
great.
Thinster.
That was such a good
That
editing
was
job.
really
Oh my
cool.
god.
Yeah, the soundscape on that is
Yeah.
really good.
That was really fun to
Incredible.
do. And as a listener, I really liked the part with Thomas, with Renaissance and Thomas. Their discussion was a great scene. And the Corbin Cassandra scene was amazing. I just picked like 10 things, but I'm done now.
That's great.
Matt.
Yeah, it's hard to pick one, obviously.
You have to pick one.
I do.
Go.
It's tough. Odd to say this, but I do love this scene. And it's not one that I'm even in. It's one that I'm listening to you guys. Well, I guess I'm in all of the scenes technically, but I mean, it's one that I'm not really an NPC as an NPC voice in them. It's on the road to Candlekeep, and it's that very small scene where Hylan is talking to Renaissance.
Oh, so when we put our foot on the sky?
Yeah,
It's so good. It's one of my favorite scenes as well.
It's really beautiful, and
Really
the
good.
lead up to it is so pure and so truthful and so honest about connections and about fear and about being there for another person. And I just found that so beautiful to listen to. And as a moment where you as a DM are trying to achieve some kind of connection, obviously between us because we're friends and we know each other, but between characters that are there for each other, that will put their neck out for each other in times where things are just, you can see where things are headed. Adventure is dangerous and it can be extremely frightening. But when you have someone behind you to help support you and put you in the right state of mind that you can do anything that you want, it's a beautiful thing to hear. And I just love that.
A lot of credit to Carrie for that moment.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny because when I threw it out there and then there was like silence and then Corbin's like, what?
Which is Corbin.
I know. And I loved how he was like, oh, all right. And then he tried to do it. He's like, this is weird. I'm going.
All right, everybody. That is a look back at year one of Podcast Party Descent into Avernus. Thank you, Matt, Andy, Rachel, and Carrie for joining me. Thanks to all the listeners who have been with us over the past year, or who perhaps have started a month ago and are binging first 26 episodes now. We'll see you next year in hell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, see you next year.
See you next
See you
year.
in hell.
Oh boy.
Thanks,
Have a good one,
everyone.
everybody.
All right, take care, everybody.